Well, we're close. I hope you've all been shopping for my presents. I was a rude little boy. I can remember saying, "Where's my present?" Actually, ask for it. Oh, and I will tell you that in my family, Christmas was a gift orgy. You know, some families make up for all the other stuff with stuff. It was pretty remarkable. The pile of wrapping on the floor afterwards, you could lose several children in it. On Christmas, I did a talk here on Sunday, and I had myself all surrounded with torn up wrapping paper and ribbon and empty boxes. It was just kind of fun. It reminded me of home. The Christmas story we've all heard, and we've lived it in various ways. That was so important as a child. I was fortunate, or not, you know. Is it a good thing to live across the street from your school? I don't know. Kind of hard to get away from it, but easy to go home for lunch. But the school had a huge front campus that had some hills and circular driveways and all grass. It was a good city block long and about a third of a block deep of just grass and front lawn. Every year, I know we are not allowed to do this anymore, but the city put up a nativity scene in that grassy area across the street from my house. Life size. I mean, it had pens on either side. They had a cow in there, and they had some sheep on the other side. They had life-size statues of Mary and Joseph and the shepherds. And I loved that thing. It was lit up at night, and people would go and walk past it, and then just as we approached Christmas, they would have a Christmas party there, and Santa would come and hand out little boxes of hard candies to all the kids. I guess today that's all illegal. Anyway, I saw that aspect of it. We've seen it in churches, and I remember our first, this is going way back, our first Sunday school. Early on, we had some kids here, and the Sunday school teacher, we had several who rotated at that time, but they came to me and they said, the kids would like to do a little play on that Christmas Sunday, you know, the last one before Christmas. And I said, okay. So they did a nativity thing. And so we removed the lectern, moved it off to the side so that there was plenty of room to see them. And they came up on stage. And Mary got down on the floor, sitting there looking very divine, if I may say. Except she was kind of great with child, this little girl. And at one point, as somebody was reading this story, out came the baby. She gave birth on our stage. And everybody in the room kind of went, oh. I think I went, oh, a little bit higher than everybody else. We've seen a variety of things. There's so many elements to the Christmas story. It's a beautiful story. And if you looked at the back of your bulletin, I hope you did, but I gave you two quotations that I dearly love at Christmas time. Of course, the one by Angelus Silesius, though Christ 1,000 times in Bethlehem be born, if he's not born in thee, thy soul is all forlorn. Obviously, Angelus realized that the birth of Christ needs to take place in us for it to make a difference in our lives. And then one of my favorite mystics is Meister Eckhart. Meister Eckhart was a German parish priest. You can see he lived about 1260 to about 1328. That's a pretty good lifespan. If it had been up to the church, he would have lived a lot shorter life than that. As a parish priest, he told the people truth with a capital T. He told the people the metaphysical truth. And the church did not like that. It is more worth to God his being brought forth spiritually in the individual virgin or good soul than that he was born of Mary bodily. You got that? It's more worth to God to bring forth spiritually in the individual virgin or good soul that which than that he was born of Mary bodily. It's more important that he's born in us than in a story from 2,000 years ago. That's the reality. It's the whole Christmas story is a story of the evolution of consciousness from human to divine. And the element which holds any story together is its theme. And in the Christmas story, the theme becomes apparent right away as the story illustrates. The first indication of that theme of the Christmas story is the framework for the telling. It's a journey. You remember Joseph and Mary. They went to a variety of places. Now, in stories, whether they're biblical, whether they're mythological, whether they're fairy or folk tale, even in dreams, this symbol of a journey is a representation or a symbol for that process of transformation, growth, and evolution. So in the Christmas story, it's the growth and evolution of consciousness. Now, for Mary and Joseph, the trip to Bethlehem is a round trip which began with a couple. And then because the child was born along the way, they returned, a family. Now that's a change. That in itself is a transformation. I've heard people who've had children say that when a child is born into the family, that the child is the center of attention. I've watched that with my friend Bishop William and Anita's grandchild, their first, who will on the 10th of December be 1 year old. And I talked to Anita this week, and she said, "You've got to get out here and see your granddaughter." They consider me family, and I get pictures periodically. You'll see pictures of a young child on the bulletin board, and that's Sydney. I think she's probably got a charmed life, but that child became the center of the whole journey and story, as it is for us, the center of the story about us. It's a story of, well, the rebirth process to which the higher self, the Christ in us, comes into our awareness, and we begin to understand that we're more than only human. We're more than this physical body. We're more than the limitations we've been living with. Now, in every story, when and where events happen, give clues to the meaning of this story. They indicate the state of consciousness which is being experienced in that particular time, or grown into, or grown through in that particular part of the story. Now, the Christmas story, it takes place in several locations. The location changes several times. One of the places that it actually touches is Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem, in Hebrew, it means habitation of peace. And that indicates that, first off, a peaceful state of mind is necessary for the evolution of your consciousness, for your soul's growth. And that is symbolized by the events that take place in this city. Now, the actual city, often they stayed going up to Jerusalem. It's on tableland that is, to most of the area, it's higher than anything around it, except if you approach it from the south. If you approach from the south, you're on the same sort of tableland, but you descend just a few feet to come down into it. So anyway, it's considered a high place, meaning that a peaceful state of mind, a state of peace in consciousness, is a high state of consciousness. Do you like peace of mind? Have you ever not had it and wanted it? Yeah. It's a high state of consciousness, and it's necessary part of this story. It's difficult to bring forth that awareness of the Christ in you when there's all this static and stuff going on, when you're all concerned about stuff outside, when you're concerned about what you're going to do, what you're going to eat, what you're going to see as a movie or on television, or all of the little things that get our attention, that distract us from our real purpose in life. And that real purpose in your life or mine is evolving an awareness of the presence of God, not just around us, but in us, working through us. And that's what the story is all about. Going up to Jerusalem into that high state of consciousness. Now, Jerusalem also happened to be a walled and fortified city. And that implies to us that a peaceful state of mind is something that needs to be protected and defended. That you don't want to let things outside pull you from that state of consciousness, do you? So when you finally reach that state of peace of mind, and how are you going to go up to Jerusalem, rise in consciousness into that peaceful state, except by turning within? Thank you. That's what's necessary. And to turn within, realize that then all the distractions outside pull you back out of it. So you need a wall. You need defenses. You need to keep yourself in that consciousness of you and the Father are one. That you abide in the very peace and presence of God. Now, that Jerusalem was the center of the Jewish faith, and you know why. It was the site of the synagogue. Now, most of the activities, most of the ritual and processes in Jewish life at the time were done in the home. Shabbat was practiced in the home. The dinner on Friday night. But there were certain rituals that were required to be at the temple, and the temple was in Jerusalem. So certain times of the year, Jews were required to come to Jerusalem to celebrate those rites in that location. Now, it's not any different for us. Nobody's requiring you now to go to the temple in Jerusalem, but you are required if you want to live this story, if you want to be that child of God, express as that child of God, know yourself as that child of God, you need to go to the temple in Jerusalem, which is what? Going in to that place of pure, perfect peace. And we call that secret place of the Most High the place where you and the Father meet, where you and God are one. That's your temple. And that's what you need to do to make that connection. There are things that point the way and show you the way, and things in your life have been pointing the way to that your entire life, and before this life, and beyond this life. But sometimes we just don't go. Sometimes I think we're afraid to go. I think we're afraid we'll see ourselves. Not our true selves, but that other part, you know? The part that sometimes is not so nice. The part that is sometimes not so loving. The part that has all kinds of restrictions and limitations. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not good enough for that. Yeah. Well, perhaps we need to see them in order to take the next step in that form of spiritual growth. Now, besides Jerusalem, there's a place that, well, they call it a hill town in Juda. In Greek, it's Judea. It was the home of Zechariah and Elizabeth. Remember, Elizabeth was a kinswoman of Mary. Some have said cousin to Mary. Do you remember what happened to Elizabeth? She was barren and then became great with child. That child was John the Baptist, the forerunner of the Christ, the one who points the way. And he represents the illumined or awakened intellect that begins to see there's something more. So Mary went there. She spent 3 months or so visiting. A hill town in Judah. It's another high place, another high state of consciousness. And that is demonstrated in the story by presented by the existence of Zechariah and Elizabeth, that they exist in a high state of consciousness, which comes from acknowledging and praising God, from knowing God is present. Now, in such a state of consciousness, can you imagine what it would be like? In a high state of consciousness like that, which was present even before the trip to Bethlehem takes place, even before Mary and Joseph head to Bethlehem. Here's that high state of consciousness in this hill town. It brings forth not the Christ, but the forerunner our friend JTB, John the Baptist. And of course, the big city, well, not the big city, but the important city we all hear about, Nazareth of Galilee. Nazareth. Nice city. It was the home of Mary and Joseph, it was kind of obscure. It was an agricultural village and of ordinary Jewish people. I almost said folks, ordinary Jewish folks. Nazareth in Hebrew means branch or offshoot or sprout. It also can mean guarded, defended, and preserved. Though it was a Jewish village, Mary considered herself an Israelite. Israelite represents a growing spiritual consciousness. So if you combine the meaning of Nazareth and of Israel with that growing spiritual consciousness, it gives the state of consciousness symbolized by the town on this hill in Judah. It was the sprout, and it developed because Nazareth is a village of ordinary people. It represents that this spiritual growth, this spiritual consciousness is available to ordinary people, to us. You don't have to be special. You don't have to have been born under special circumstances. There are only so many children of God out there. No, it's available to everybody. Because the truth is, not only are you a child of God, but probably over these holidays, shopping, you're going to see people you are not really sure are children of God. You might encounter a few of them on the interstates as you're driving to shopping centers. Or you might wrestle over a garment or something in the store with one of them. You know that the other person certainly couldn't be a child of God, or they wouldn't be trying to take that thing that you know is yours to buy for Christmas this year. And it's the only one left. I'll tell you, I made the mistake Friday. Was it Black Friday? I went to Crown Center. Yeah. It was an experience. Another place, Galilee. It was Nazareth of Galilee. Nazareth is located in this area, this region, and it's an area of fertile hills, and of course there's that freshwater lake. You're familiar with it, right? The Sea of Galilee. You know, they still fish in it today. It's still bringing forth fish. It's a district that feeds people. So Galilee means rolling energy. Rolling energy. And think of that like momentum. Momentum. You know, you get something moving. What does it want to do? It wants to keep moving. Well, that's not always true of me. I get moving and I think, oh, why am I doing this? I should just be still. Be still and know. So this momentum, this suggests that Nazareth is consciousness that has momentum to grow, to get bigger, to develop. Nazareth, Galilee is where Mary accepts her role in the Christmas story. To prepare herself, she goes to the hill town of Juda, where she stays for about 3 months, preparing for the next step. And then, of course, Bethlehem. Had to be Bethlehem, you know. Wherever Jesus was actually born, for the proper metaphysical meaning of the story, the trip to Bethlehem is necessary. And not only to fulfill prophecy, but also because of the meaning of its name, its location and character of the city, and its connection with David, remember? He was to be the house of David. And Bethlehem means house of bread or food, house of sustenance, house of living. So you can think metaphysically, Bethlehem represents a consciousness of infinite substance or divine energy, which provides everything necessary to create and to sustain everything, including that emerging consciousness of the Christ of God in the heart of man. Bethlehem is on a hill. It's on that same tableland as Jerusalem. But being to the south, the way between it and Jerusalem is at points a slightly bit higher than Jerusalem. And that has a metaphysical significance as well. As Jerusalem, peace of mind is a high state of consciousness. Bethlehem represents one a little higher. Got to raise above just peace of mind to bring forth that Christ child. You have to bring forth a consciousness of the very presence of God, consciousness of the Christ in you. And of course, the last place in the Christmas story is Egypt. And we know some of the challenges that has gone on there, right? But actually, for them, Egypt ends up being a place of protection. A place, even though it's what we consider a place of worldly desire or consciousness of the world, that image likeness of God needs some protection, and that's our physicality, protecting it and keeping it safe from, remember who the evil one was at that time? Remember King Herod? Kind of the puppet king of Rome, who represents that egotistical ego, that tyrannical ego that's inside, that does everything to maintain the status quo, to keep it in control. And Egypt was the protection, getting away, stepping away from that human self. It's going to be an interesting journey for all of us. And this morning's affirmation about the Christ of God within you and having faith in the presence of that Christ of God within you. You can work with that throughout this week as we take our own individual journey towards Christmas.